My name is Yusuf Al-Kareem, and I am the Saudi security chief who went viral for getting baptized after spending 3 decades hunting Christians. The pastor's voice is quiet, careful. Do you believe Jesus Christ is Lord? I hesitate. Not because I doubt, but because I remember who I used to be. Yes, I finally answer. Yes, even after everything I did. The water closes over me. When I rise, I am crying. Someone in the room is recording. Within hours, millions are watching. They see surrender. They don't see the war that came before it. I never imagined I would be sitting here saying these words. Not after everything I have done. For nearly 30 years of my life, I made it my mission to prove that Christianity was a deception. I interrogated believers in windowless rooms across Saudi Arabia. I appeared on national television where I publicly dismissed their faith as Western propaganda. I supervised the arrest of anyone caught distributing Bibles or Christian materials. I gave interviews. I spoke at security conferences. I spent my entire career building a case against the God these people worshipped. And I was proud of it. I thought I was protecting my country. I thought I was defending truth from foreign invasion, preserving order from dangerous ideas. But I was wrong. I was so terribly, completely, devastatingly wrong. A few months ago, at 52 years old, I was baptized in the name of Jesus Christ. I went under that water as a man who had spent his whole life enforcing laws against God. And I came up weeping, broken, and finally surrendered. I do not deserve to be telling you this story. I do not deserve the mercy that has been shown to me. And that is exactly why I have to tell it. Because if Jesus can save a man like me, a man who mocked him on television, a man who imprisoned his followers, then he can save anyone. Before we go any further, I want to thank the people who are giving me this platform to share what happened. When God broke through my walls, these folks gave me a chance to tell my story, and I don't take that lightly. There are so many testimonies out there that need to be heard, stories of God reaching into the darkest places and making them new. So if you are watching this, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and let others know what God is doing. It's a small thing, but it helps more people hear about Jesus who saves. Let me take you back to the beginning. I grew up in a military household in Riyadh in the 1970s. My father was a colonel in the Saudi Armed Forces, a man who measured love in terms of obedience and respect in terms of silence. In our home, discipline came before kindness. Strength came before emotion. Weakness was not tolerated, and questions were viewed as defiance. I learned early that feelings were liabilities. My father never told me he loved me. He told me what was expected of me. He never asked about my fears. He corrected my posture. When I cried as a child, he would leave the room until I stopped. Men don't weep, he would say. Men control themselves. So I learned to control myself. By the time I was a teenager, I had mastered the art of showing nothing. No fear, no joy, no doubt. I became exactly what my father wanted, a son who could be shaped into something useful for the state. At 18, I entered security training. While other young men my age were discovering freedom, I was learning interrogation techniques. How to read body language. How to identify deception. How to apply pressure without leaving marks. I was good at it. By 25, I was conducting interrogations myself. Foreign workers. Dissidents. Anyone suspected of activities that threatened national stability. I sat across from people and dismantled their defenses with precision. I learned something crucial during those years. People break faster when you remove compassion. Compassion creates hesitation. Hesitation creates weakness. And in my line of work, Weakness was unacceptable. By 30, I was supervising entire operations. I had a team under me, a reputation, authority that opened doors and silenced questions. I was respected, feared, even, and I liked it. During those years, foreign religious groups were becoming more active in the region. Christian missionaries were operating quietly among migrant workers. Materials were being distributed. Secret gatherings were happening in private homes. The government saw it as a threat, Western ideology disguised as faith, undermining our values, our culture, our stability. I was called on to speak about it publicly. The first time I appeared on television, I was nervous. But once the cameras turned on and the interviewer asked me about the Christian problem, something shifted. I felt powerful. I had an audience, a platform. I said things like, "These people prey on the vulnerable. They sell hope to workers who are desperate and far from home. It's manipulation dressed up as salvation. And religion is a tool for the weak to survive reality. Strong societies don't need foreign fairy tales." The studio audience applauded. I felt invincible. They invited me back. Again and again. I became known as a man who spoke plainly about threats others were too diplomatic to name. I built a career not just on enforcement, but on rhetoric, on control. But control at work doesn't translate to control at home. My marriage was distant. My wife and I lived like polite strangers sharing a house. We spoke about schedules and bills, never about feelings or dreams. I told myself it didn't matter. Marriage was a social contract, not an emotional one. My son grew up barely knowing me. I was present but absent, there but unavailable. I attended his school events but never asked him how he felt. I provided for him but never played with him. He learned, just as I had learned, that fathers were figures of authority, not sources of comfort. I was repeating my father's mistakes, but I couldn't see it. Or maybe I could, and I just didn't care. The emptiness inside me grew with every passing year. But I filled it with work, with control, with the illusion that power was the same thing as purpose. I perfected the performance. At the office, I was the man who never wavered. On television, I was the voice of unwavering certainty. At home, I was the presence that required nothing and gave nothing. Power hides emptiness well. I had perfected that deception. The arrest report came across my desk on a Tuesday morning. Daniel Okafor, Nigerian national, construction worker, suspected of distributing Christian materials among migrant laborers. It wasn't unusual. We processed cases like this regularly. Foreign workers who couldn't leave their faith at the border, who thought they could operate quietly in the shadows, who underestimated our reach. I assigned the case to my team and thought nothing more of it. Until I saw him. They brought Daniel in on a Thursday afternoon. I was observing through the one-way glass as they processed him. Most prisoners arrive in one of two states, terrified or defiant. They beg for mercy or they curse our names. They cry or they shout. They make promises or they make threats. Daniel did neither. He was calm. Too calm. He sat in the holding room with his hands folded, eyes closed, lips moving silently. Praying, I assumed. As if that would help him. I decided to handle the interrogation myself. When I walked into the room, he looked up and smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not a mocking one. Just peaceful. It unnerved me. I opened his file. Daniel Okafor. You've been accused of distributing prohibited religious materials. Do you deny this? No, he said simply. I don't deny it. His honesty caught me off guard. Most people lie first, confess later. You understand this is a serious offense. I do. And yet you did it anyway. Yes. I studied his face, looking for fear, for calculation, for the crack that would let me in. Instead, he looked directly at me and said, "God still loves you." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You don't even know me." He smiled again. "Jesus does." The audacity of it. This man, sitting in my interrogation room, facing charges that could end in deportation or worse, was trying to witness to me. I leaned forward. "I'm going to give you one chance to cooperate fully. Tell me who you've been meeting with. Give me names, locations, everything." "I can't do that," he said quietly. "Can't? Or won't?" "Won't. I won't betray people who are seeking God." I decided then that I would break him. Not just get information. I would break his spirit. That insufferable peace, that unshakable calm, I would shatter it. But something strange happened over the following days. I questioned him harder. Longer sessions. Harsher tactics. I had him moved to a cell with the most volatile prisoners, thinking the environment would crack him. It didn't. Instead, I began to notice things. When other prisoners screamed at the guards, Daniel prayed silently in the corner. When fights broke out, Daniel stayed out of them, sometimes stepping between men to calm them down. When guards mocked him, and they did, frequently, Daniel thanked them when they brought food. Every single time. Other prisoners started watching him chew. Some with suspicion. Some with curiosity. One man asked him why he wasn't fighting back, why he wasn't angry like the rest of them. I was in the corridor when I overheard Daniel's answer. "Because anger doesn't change hearts. Only love does." It was absurd, naive, ridiculous. So why couldn't I stop thinking about it? One night, late into my shift, I found myself standing outside his cell. He was awake, sitting against the wall. "Why aren't you angry?" I asked before I could stop myself. He looked up, unsurprised to see me. "Because Jesus was not angry at the people who hurt him," he said softly. The words hit me like a physical blow. I walked away without responding. Went home. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Jesus was not angry at the people who hurt him. The sentence followed me into the darkness. It disrupted my sleep. It sat in my mind like an unwelcome guest. For the first time in 30 years, something had slipped past my defenses, and I didn't know how to get it out. Weeks passed, and I couldn't get Daniel out of my head. This wasn't supposed to happen. I had interrogated hundreds of people over the years. Thousands, maybe. They came through the system, and they left, either broken, compliant, or deported. I never thought about them after they were gone. But Daniel was different. He was still there, still calm, still praying, still somehow untouched by the machinery designed to crush people like him. My interrogation tactics weren't working. The isolation wasn't working. Nothing was working. And worse, I was becoming curious. Curiosity was dangerous. Curiosity meant I was losing control. One evening, I went to his cell unannounced. No guards. No recording devices. Just me and him, separated by bars. "Why did you come here?" I asked abruptly. He looked up from the book someone had smuggled to him. A Bible, undoubtedly, though we'd never found it during searches. "To Saudi Arabia," he clarified. "Yes. You knew the risks. You knew what happens to people like you here. So why?" Daniel set the book aside and stood, walking closer to the bars. "Because Jesus changed my life," he said simply, "and I cannot hide that." I shook my head. You could die for that. His response came without hesitation. I already died once. Now I live for him. The words made no sense. What does that even mean? I demanded. It means the man I was before Jesus. The angry, lost, broken man. He's dead. The person standing here now only exists because Christ gave me new life. So even if they kill this body, I'm already alive in a way that can't be taken away. I stared at him, trying to find the manipulation, the angle, the hidden agenda. There was none. He actually believed it. You are insane, I muttered, and walked away. But I couldn't stay away. Over the following days, I found myself watching Daniel during my rounds. Not interrogating. Just observing. I watched him pray for the guards who mistreated him. I saw him mouth their names silently, eyes closed, hands pressed together. The same guards who spat near his cell, who, accidentally, kicked his food tray, who called him filth. He prayed for them. I watched him share his food. His portions were already small, prison rations barely enough for one man. But when the prisoner in the next cell complained of hunger, Daniel pushed half his bread through the bars. Why? The other prisoner asked suspiciously. Because we are brothers, Daniel answered. We are not brothers, the man spat back. I'm not even Christian. That doesn't change what I said. I watched him refuse to defend himself. When another prisoner accused him of thinking he was better than everyone else, Daniel didn't argue. He didn't justify himself. He simply said, I'm not better than anyone. That's why I needed Jesus. It was maddening. Every instinct I had, every tool I developed over 30 years, told me this man should have broken by now. But he hadn't. And I was the one coming undone. One night, working late, I passed by his cell after most of the facility had gone quiet. I heard his voice, barely a whisper. I stopped. Listened. He was praying. I'd heard him pray before, but this time I caught fragments of words. Yusuf Al-Kareem, open his eyes, let him see your love, break through the walls. He was praying for me. By name. My chest tightened. My hands clenched into fists. I should have been angry. I should have stormed into that cell and reminded him exactly who had power here. But I wasn't angry. I was frightened. That frightened me more than insults ever could. More than threats or curses or defiance. Because anger I understood. Anger I could control. But this? Someone praying for me while I held the keys to his cell? I didn't have a category for it. I left the building and sat in my car for 20 minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel. Questions I couldn't answer swirled in my mind. Why would he pray for me? What did he see that I couldn't? And why did his peace feel more powerful than my authority? 6 months after Daniel's arrest, my life began to fall apart. It started at home. My wife confronted me one evening as I was preparing for bed. I'd come home late again, eaten dinner alone, and planned to sleep before another early shift. Yusuf, she said from the doorway, we need to talk. It's late, Amira. It's always late. Or you are always busy. Or always tired. There's always a reason we can't talk. I sighed, already exhausted by the conversation before it began. What do you want me to say? I want you to say something. Anything. I want you to look at me like I'm a person, not an inconvenience. That's not fair. Fair. Her voice cracked. You've been emotionally absent for years, Yusuf. Our son doesn't know you. I barely know you. You come home, you go to work, you exist in this house like a ghost. Where are you? I'm right here. No, she said quietly. You are not. "You haven't been here for a long time." I didn't know how to respond. So I said nothing. She waited. And when the silence stretched too long, she left the room. The next morning, my son wouldn't look at me at breakfast. When I asked him about school, he answered in one-word responses. When I tried to ask about his friends, he excused himself and went to his room. Amira watched from the kitchen. "He's learning from you," she said. "How to shut people out." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. At work, I threw myself into cases with renewed intensity. Control. That's what I needed. If home was chaos, work would be order. But it wasn't working. My colleagues noticed. I snapped at a junior officer over a minor filing error. I redid reports that were already adequate. I stayed later than necessary, reviewing cases that didn't require my attention. "Sir, are you all right?" one of my team members asked carefully. "I'm fine. Focus on your work." But I wasn't fine. The sleepless nights were getting worse. Daniel's words played on repeat in my mind. Jesus was not angry at the people who hurt him. I already died once. Now I live for him. God still loves you. I would lie awake at 2 a.m., 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, unable to silence the questions. One afternoon, I conducted an interrogation of a man suspected of embezzlement. Standard procedure. Apply pressure. Find inconsistencies. Extract confession. But midway through, as I was using tactics I'd employed 1,000 times before, I caught sight of my reflection in the one-way glass. I saw what he saw. A cold man. A hard man. A man using fear as a weapon. I saw my father. The interrogation suddenly felt hollow. Meaningless. I was going through motions that once felt purposeful, but now felt empty. I ended the session early. My team looked confused. The isolation was becoming unbearable. I was surrounded by colleagues, subordinates, authority, and yet I felt completely alone. I stopped accepting invitations to gatherings. Stopped making small talk. I existed in an ever-shrinking circle of control that was supposed to protect me, but instead was suffocating me. The weather reports that week warned of storms. I ignored them. One evening, leaving work later than usual, the sky had already darkened. Rain was beginning to fall. Heavy clouds rolled in from the desert, turning the horizon black. I should have waited it out. Should have stayed at the facility until it passed. But I wanted to go home. Or maybe I just wanted to escape. I got in my car and started driving. The rain intensified quickly. Within minutes, visibility dropped to almost nothing. The roads became slick. Lightning split the sky. I gripped the steering wheel, leaning forward, trying to see through the downpour. My phone buzzed. Amira calling. Probably asking when I'd be home. I didn't answer. The rain hammered against the windshield. Thunder shook the car. The world outside became a blur of water and darkness. I should have pulled over. I should have seen the storm coming. In every sense. The storm hit with full force. Rain pounded the windshield faster than the wipers could clear it. The road ahead disappeared into sheets of water. I slowed down, hands tight on the wheel, but it was already too late. I felt the tires lose grip. Hydroplaning. The car began to slide sideways. I turned into the skid, training kicking in automatically, but the physics didn't care about my training. The vehicle spun. Then it flipped. The world became a chaos of motion and sound. Metal screaming. Glass exploding. My body thrown against the seatbelt. The roof caving inward. Everything spinning, tumbling, crashing. Then silence. Or almost silence. The rain still hammered on the underside of the car. Now the top. The engine ticked and hissed. Something dripped steadily. Water. Or fuel. Or blood. I was upside down. Pain radiated through my left side. My head throbbed. Something warm ran down my face. When I tried to move, my body screamed in protest. Trapped. I was trapped. The seat belt held me suspended at an awkward angle. I reached for the release, but my hands were shaking too badly to grip it properly. My vision blurred. The smell hit me then. Gasoline, sharp and acrid. Panic seized my chest. Fire. If the car caught fire. I pulled at the seat belt. Yanked. Twisted. Nothing. My breath came in short, rapid gasps. The darkness pressed in. Rain continued its relentless assault on the wreckage. I was alone. Bleeding. Hanging upside down in a car that could explode at any moment. All my power meant nothing here. All my authority, my control, my 3 decades of commanding rooms and breaking people. Useless. I couldn't control this. I couldn't fix this. I was helpless. Memories flashed through my mind in fragments. My father's cold face, measuring me and finding me wanting. My son at the breakfast table, refusing to meet my eyes. Amira's voice, "You haven't been here for a long time." Daniel in his cell, eyes peaceful. "God still loves you." Daniel, praying for me. Praying for a man who didn't deserve prayer. Fear gripped my throat. Real fear. Visceral. Uncontrollable. I was going to die here. Alone. Empty. Having spent my entire life building walls that protected nothing but my own emptiness. Words came out before I could stop them. Not practiced words. Not proper words. Not the kind of prayer I'd heard recited in mosques or whispered by prisoners in cells. Just raw, desperate honesty. God. My voice cracked. God, if you exist. The rain pounded harder. Don't let me die like this. Tears mixed with blood on my face. Please. I don't want to die like this. Silence. Except for the storm. I don't know how long I hung there. Minutes. Maybe longer. Then I heard voices. Shouting through the rain. Flashlights swept across the wreckage. Someone's inside. Hands on the door. Metal wrenching. The sound of equipment cutting through twisted steel. "Sir, can you hear me? Stay still. We are getting you out." They pulled me from the car piece by piece. Careful. Professional. By the time they laid me on the stretcher, the rain was washing the blood from my face. I looked up at the night sky. Dark, turbulent, alive with lightning. And I was still breathing. The hospital kept me for 4 days. Broken ribs. Concussion. Lacerations. Deep bruising. Nothing that wouldn't heal. The doctor said I was lucky. Amira came. Sat by the bed. Didn't say much. Just held my hand. My son stood in the doorway, uncertain, until I asked him to come closer. He did. We didn't talk. But he stayed. Physically, I was recovering. But something inside had broken in that car. Something that couldn't be fixed with stitches or time. The wall I'd built around myself, the certainty, the control, the conviction that I had everything figured out, it had cracked. And through that crack, something had slipped in. A question I couldn't ignore. A possibility I couldn't dismiss. What if I'd been wrong about everything? I survived the crash. But I wasn't the same. The man who climbed into that car was dead. I just didn't know yet who would take his place.
I returned to work 3 weeks after the accident. The physical scars were visible. A line across my forehead from the stitches. A limp that would fade but hadn't yet. bruising that had turned from purple to yellow-green. But the internal scars, those were invisible. My colleagues welcomed me back cautiously. "Good to have you back, sir. Glad you are all right." They kept their distance, unsure how to approach a man who would nearly died. I went through the motions. Reviewed reports. Signed paperwork. Attended briefings. But my mind was elsewhere. On the second day back, I found myself walking through the detention corridor. I told myself I was conducting a routine inspection. But my feet carried me to a specific cell. Daniel's. He was sitting on the floor, reading. When he heard my footsteps, he looked up. Our eyes met. He stood slowly, walked to the bars, and smiled. "God heard you," he said quietly. My heart stopped. "What?" "In the car. When you prayed. God heard you." My throat went dry. "How do you know?" He gestured at me, at the scars, the evidence of survival, the fact that I was standing there at all. "Because you are still here." The words hit me like a physical force. No one knew about that prayer. I hadn't told anyone. It had been a moment of private desperation, alone in the dark, trapped and terrified. But somehow, this man knew. Or maybe he just understood what happens when people finally run out of pride. My defenses, already cracked, began to crumble entirely. "I don't." I started, then stopped. "I don't understand any of this." "I know," Daniel said gently. "But you are starting to ask the right questions." That night, I stayed after my shift ended. The facility emptied. Guards rotated out. Only skeleton crew remained. I went back to Daniel's cell. This time, I wasn't interrogating. I wasn't observing. I wasn't in control. I pulled up a chair and sat across from the bars. We looked at each other for a long moment. Why does Jesus forgive people who don't deserve it? I asked. The question had been building for months. Through all the sleepless nights, the watching, the wondering. Daniel leaned forward, his expression serious. "Because none of us deserve it," he said simply. "That's the point. If we deserved it, it wouldn't be grace. It would be payment. But Jesus doesn't offer payment. He offers a gift." "I've done terrible things," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've hurt people. My voice broke. I've spent 30 years enforcing laws against people like you. Against him. I know. So how can there be forgiveness for that?" Daniel's eyes filled with compassion. "Because Jesus didn't come for people who had it all together. He came for people who were broken, lost, running. He came for people exactly like you. Like me. A security chief who would build a career on control. A man who would mocked faith on television. Someone who would caused suffering and called it duty. "Can I pray for you?" Daniel asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He closed his eyes. Began to speak. Not the formal prayers I'd heard all my life. Not recited words or practiced phrases. Just honest conversation with someone he believed was listening. "Father, thank you for sparing Yusuf's life. Thank you for bringing him here tonight. I pray that you would open his eyes to see your love. Break through the walls he's built. Show him that your grace is bigger than his past. That your mercy reaches further than his mistakes. Draw him to yourself. Let him know that he's not too far gone. That you are calling him home." Something inside me collapsed. Not broke, collapsed. Like a wall I'd been holding up for decades suddenly released, and I didn't have the strength to rebuild it. I felt it physically. A weight lifting. A barrier dissolving. When Daniel finished praying, I couldn't speak. I stood, nodded, and left. At home, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. 3 a.m. The house was silent. Amira slept beside me. The world outside was still. I whispered into the darkness, Jesus. The name felt foreign on my lips. If you are real, show me. Silence. But not the empty silence I'd always known. This silence felt full, like someone listening. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not power. Peace. It washed over me quietly, unexpectedly. Not dramatic. Not overwhelming. Just present. Real. I lay there in the dark, tears sliding down my face, and felt the weight I'd carried for 30 years begin to lift. I didn't have answers yet. But I'd stopped running from the questions. The following weeks, I became a different kind of investigator. Late at night, after Amira had gone to bed, I would lock my office door and open my laptop. Not for work. For something I'd never done before. I searched for testimonies. Not to mock them. Not to find weaknesses in their arguments. To understand. I read stories of former Muslims who would encounter Jesus. I read accounts of atheists who would spend years fighting God before surrendering. I read testimonies of men who would be violent, angry, controlled, men who sounded uncomfortably like me. One story was from a former interrogator in another country. He described the same techniques I'd used. The same philosophy. The same emptiness masked as strength. Then he described meeting Christ. I saw myself in his before. And I wondered if I could become his after. But resistance fought acceptance every step of the way. My old self argued constantly. This is weakness. This is what broken people need when they can't face reality. You are stronger than this. Then I'd remember the peace I'd felt at 3 a.m. The unexplainable calm in Daniel's eyes. The way prayer had slipped from my lips in the wreckage without thought. Resistance. Acceptance. Back and forth. A war inside my own mind. I read late into the night, night after night. Testimonies of transformation. Explanations of grace. The story of Jesus, not the sanitized version I'd dismissed on television, but the real story. A man who touched lepers. Who ate with outcasts. Who forgave the people executing him. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. I'd never known that's what he said. One night, 3 weeks into my searching, something broke. I was reading a testimony from a man who would persecuted Christians in his country. He wrote, I thought strength meant never needing anyone. Jesus taught me that true strength is admitting you can't do it alone. The words shattered something inside me. I closed the laptop. Fell to my knees right there in my office. Not trained. Not disciplined. Not following any protocol. Just honest. Jesus. My voice cracked. I'm tired of pretending I'm strong. Tears came. I didn't expect them. Didn't plan them. Couldn't control them. They poured out. Decades of suppressed emotion, hidden pain, carefully maintained facades. I wept like a child. For the first time since I was young, I let myself break. And somehow, in the breaking, I felt more whole than I ever had. The internal battle continued for days. Old identity versus new truth. The man I'd been for 52 years versus the man I was becoming. Some mornings I'd wake up convinced it was all emotional weakness. By evening, I'd be reading testimonies again, hungry for more. Then, one afternoon, I received notification. Daniel Okafor was being released. Deportation order. He'd be escorted to the airport within 24 hours. My chest tightened. I went to see him one final time. He was collecting his few belongings when I arrived at his cell. He looked up and smiled, the same peaceful smile that had unnerved me months ago. "Yusuf," he said warmly, as if we were friends, as if I hadn't been his captor. "You are leaving?" "Yes. Going home." We stood in awkward silence. "I never thanked you," I said finally. "For what?" "For praying for me. For seeing something in me I couldn't see." Daniel stepped closer to the bars. "Your story isn't finished," he said quietly. "What God started in you, He'll complete. I know it." "How can you know?" "Because He's faithful, even when we are not." They came to escort him out shortly after. Before he left, he turned back. "Find a church, Yusuf. You are going to need family." Then he was gone. I stood in the empty corridor, alone with my decision. For weeks, I'd been reading about faith in secret. But Daniel was right. I couldn't stay in hiding forever. I began asking careful questions. Quiet inquiries. Where did Christians meet in Jeddah? Were there gatherings? Communities? It took time, discretion, trust. But eventually, someone gave me an address. A house outside the city. Unmarked. Unremarkable. Friday night, they whispered. After dark. I wrote it down. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking towards something instead of running from it. The question wasn't whether I'd go. It was whether I'd have the courage to walk through the door when I got there.
3 weeks after Daniel left, I drove to the address I'd been given. Friday night. After dark. A house on the outskirts of Jeddah, tucked between empty lots and quiet streets. I parked 2 blocks away. Walked the rest of the distance. My heart pounded with every step. What was I doing? I was a security official. I'd spent 30 years on the other side of this. I'd arrested people for doing exactly what I was about to do. But I couldn't stop walking. I reached the door. Hesitated. Raised my hand to knock. It opened before I could. A man stood there. Middle-aged, kind eyes, gentle smile. "Come in, brother," he said softly. "You are welcome here." Inside, the house was simple. 20 people, maybe 30, sitting on cushions and chairs. Filipinos, Africans, Indians, a few Westerners. All quiet. All watching me with curiosity but not judgment. The man who would open the door introduced himself as Pastor Michael. "First time?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak. "You are safe here," he said. "What brings you?" "I'm looking for Jesus," I whispered. His smile widened. "Then you are in the right place." He didn't ask my name. Didn't ask my background. Didn't need to know who I'd been. Only who I was now. After worship, songs I didn't know but somehow felt, Pastor Michael spoke about grace. About second chances. About how Jesus specialized in reaching the unreachable. Then he asked if anyone wanted to be baptized. My hand went up before I could think. They filled a small pool in the back room. Simple. Functional. Nothing elaborate. I stood before it in white clothing they'd given me, shaking. Others gathered around, praying quietly, supporting a stranger they'd just met. Pastor Michael stepped into the water and extended his hand. I took it. The water was cool, clear. I stood there, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then the pastor looked at me and asked the question, "Do you believe Jesus Christ is Lord?" I hesitated, not from doubt, but because I remembered everything. The television interviews, the interrogations, The mockery. The pride. Daniel's face. The car crash. The prayers I'd dismissed. The lives I'd affected. Who I'd been. Who I was becoming. Yes, I answered, my voice breaking. Yes, after fighting him for years. Then it is my honor, Pastor Michael said, to baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The water closed over my head. In that moment, I went under as Yusuf Al-Kareem, security chief, mocker of Christians, enforcer of fear, builder of walls. When I rose, I came up as something new, still Yusuf Al-Kareem, but now a follower of Christ. Tears streamed down my face, not tears of shame, tears of surrender, of release, of finally letting go of the weight I'd carried for decades. The people around the pool embraced me, strangers becoming family in an instant. I didn't notice someone recording. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. Someone had posted it online. Within hours, it had thousands of views. By afternoon, millions. The comments flooded in. Fake. Propaganda. Impossible. This is staged. No way this is real. People who would seen me on television recognized my face. They couldn't reconcile the man who would spoken against Christianity with the man crying in baptismal water. But I know who I was. And I know who I am now. They don't need to believe me. I lived it. Power taught me control. Jesus taught me surrender. For 30 years, I thought strength meant never breaking, never bending, never admitting need. I was wrong. True strength is falling to your knees and admitting you can't do it alone. I think about Daniel often, a prisoner who prayed for a man who didn't deserve prayer. That prayer found me anyway. It followed me home, into the wreckage, through sleepless nights, into that office at 3 a.m., and finally, into water. I don't know where Daniel is now. If he's seen the video, if he knows what his faithfulness produced. But I know this. His obedience to Jesus changed my eternity. If you are reading this, watching this, hearing this story, know this. If Jesus can reach a Saudi security chief who mocked him publicly, who imprisoned his followers, who built a career on opposing everything he stood for, then he can reach anyone. Anyone. Your past doesn't disqualify you. Your mistakes don't put you beyond his reach. Your pride doesn't make you unreachable. I am living proof. Sometimes the hardest prison is not the cell. It's the heart. The walls we build. The control we cling to. The certainty we hide behind. But Jesus still opens doors. Even the ones we've locked from the inside. Especially those. My name is Yusuf Al-Kareem. I was lost. Now I'm found. And if he can find me, he can find you, Jew.